Hello, and welcome to the Education in Focus podcast from Adoption Focus, a space to delve into all things school and education related. My name is Leigh, and I'm the training manager at Adoption Focus. The education of our children is a real passion of mine, and so it's a privilege for me to be joined by two of our education experts here at Adoption Focus, Jason Gilman-Hughes and Lisa Biggs. Jason is our wonderful education advisor, and your background is primary education, isn't it, Jason?
It is, that's right. I spent more years than I care to mention, 25, I think, years in primary schools, in different roles, teaching, and then moving into special needs coordinator, phase leader, deputy head, and eventually a head teacher. And over that time, obviously saw many different children, including children who were in care, looked after children who've been adopted, and something that I was very interested in. And then the last sort of 4.5 years or so, I've been a foster parent too. So I think hopefully that gives me a bit of a foot in both camps, as it were. So having seen what it's like, the reality of looking after children with developmental trauma, as well as trying to support them in schools. So hopefully it's something I can offer some perspective on.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. And our second expert is Lisa Biggs. Lisa is part of the training team at Adoption Focus, supporting our adopters to navigate their adoption journey. And your experience is as a secondary school teacher, isn't it, Lisa?
Yes, it is. So I taught secondary school maths for 13 years. So I was never the most popular of teachers because no one really likes maths, or especially not when I was doing the GCSE reset classes. But although I never reached the dizzying heights of headship, I did hold a variety of responsibilities within the school and enjoyed my time there a lot. But more recently, I've become an adoptive mum, and it's been a real eye-opener actually engaging with the education system as a parent rather than being kind of in the thick of it as a teacher. And so, yeah, hopefully I can bring two different perspectives to our podcast.
That's great. Thank you, Lisa. So, just for you listeners, within Education in Focus, we will explore a range of topics and we would really welcome your suggestions, questions, and contributions. So, please feel free to drop us an email at education@adoption-focus.org.uk. Some topics we explore will be specific to adoption and the needs of our children, whilst others will be more general. We will never profess to be the experts on every school and every child, but will endeavour to offer different perspectives and give you the tools and knowledge to support your child's education. We would love to hear your experiences too. So if you fancy joining us on the podcast, you're more than welcome. Just drop us an email. Jason, as an adoptive parent, where do I even start in looking for a school?
Well, it's a good question. I think obviously you're going to have to look on the local authority website if it comes to applications. But I suppose from most people's point of view, they want to hope that their local school, the nearest one to them, is the best for their child, isn't it? I know there's a lot of talk about parental choice and parents being able to choose what school they want to send their children to, but the reality isn't always that simple, is it? Because sometimes the school's a long way. It depends if you live in a town where there's several schools not far away. If there's even space in the school, that's another issue. I think you've got to think about the practicalities of getting a child there and back. So if you're going to drive, that's okay, but is there parking? You're going to walk? Do you get the bus, cycle, all this and so on? Do other children nearby go to the same school? If your child's already been to a nursery, then hopefully you'll be able to follow some of their friends into the school they're going to. And it all very much depends on when they join you, when they come to go to school. Some children, if they've been with you from birth, let's say, or very soon after, they will have gone to a nursery and you will have seen them interacting. You'll be able to find a school that by that stage you'll hopefully have established relationships that you can use. But if your child's joined later on, if you adopt a child who's a little bit older, then of course they might be already at school age and it might be more difficult to know where to send them. There's a lot to think about, really. I think one of the things we'll talk about is how important it is to visit a school. I think we'll come on to talk about that. I don't think you can beat that, ultimately, finding out. If you know people around, talk to them about what they know about the local schools, see what their views are. Word of mouth is very important. There's lots of things to consider.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I mean, once you get to secondary school, they quite often have specialisms. So you might see that your local school is specialist in sports or maybe creative arts or STEM subjects, that's science, technology, engineering, and maths. And that can sometimes play a part if you know that your child has got a particular interest in something. There's also faith schools to consider. So my daughter is at a Church of England school at the moment, and that was quite important to us. But I really do go back to that idea of perhaps choosing one that's quite close to you. So I enjoy walking my daughter to school and back when I can. And at the other end of that scale, I've worked in sixth form centres where children have been travelling over an hour each way on public transport, and that massively affects their energy levels, the amount of time they've got for independent studying, and their ability to engage with extracurricular activities. So it really is, I think, kind of one of the primary things to consider is how are you going to get there and how long is it going to take? So.
Let's go back to visiting a school. How important is that?
I think it's really important. I've worked in a few different schools with a variety of different Ofsted ratings, and really, I think the biggest factor for how well you're going to engage with it and how well your child is going to get on there is whether you enjoy being there or not. As soon as you walk into a school, you get a feeling for its ethos. You can see the displays on the wall, you can hopefully see children who are around there, you can meet some members of staff, and if you feel when you are there that you can work with these people, that it's welcoming, that your child's going to fit in, then that goes an awful long way, really, in working out whether it's the right school or not. Jason, how do you feel about it?
I couldn't agree more. I think it's one of the most important things you can ever do is to visit a school, even if you've set your heart on a school or it is the one that's local, and you're pretty 99% certain you're going to send your child there because you know your child and you know their needs and their interests, and you want to know if that school actually will fit the majority of those needs and it's going to be the right place for them. And of all the things I would say, even as a as a former head, thinking about standards and academic outcomes is fine, but the most important thing is really is the nurture and the sort of environment, the ethos that school has, and how welcome your child's going to feel and how safe and secure they're going to feel there. Because ultimately, we know that if they're not feeling like safe and happy, they're never going to flourish.
Yeah.
So visiting is important. It's a bit like I've always said to people, it's like when you go and look for a house that you're going to move into. You walk into a house, sometimes you get a feel, you can't put your finger on what it is, but you know somehow you found your home. And schools can be very much like that. You feel
Definitely.
something in the air. There's something you can't finger on, but it's there that says this feels right, my child.
I recently heard a parent who they went to go visit school. They had their heart absolutely set on, and they could tell very quickly when walking through the door that it wasn't right. And the reasons that they quoted was because the children who were quite young, primary school aged, were all in blazers. They had ties
Mm,
on, sat down, and it was very perhaps how you might imagine older children to be
yeah,
learning, and they could just tell very, very quickly that they didn't feel it was a good fit for their child because they wanted it their learning to be more activity
yeah,
based, and they wouldn't have got that feeling unless they'd walked in through the door.
absolutely. Yeah, I can understand that completely. The thing is, as well, schools are so different from each other. Even if they're quite close by physically, a few streets away, they can be so vastly different in ethos and outlook. Even if they're following broadly similar curriculums and so on. So you can't beat that. Walking in there, finding out what it's like. Um, Calling out for, arranging visits is very easy. Schools will always be happy to have you there. They'll always have set dates where they'll have open evenings and things like that, particularly when there's key intake. So if your child's going into reception, then there's usually quite a good setup of already well-organised events for children who are going to start. And they'll do lots of pre-visits and things like that to help children have a bit of a nice time and get to know the environment and things like that as well. But even so, you might think that your child or you might want to visit just for yourself to get a sense of the school. There may be things you want to talk about with the person who's taking you around. Hopefully, it'll be the head teacher, somebody senior that takes you around the school, and you can sort of sound them out about some of the things that they provide. Because if you've got a child that has particular needs, you want to know that that school can meet those needs and understand them. And that's really important to get that sense of, are we on the right track here? Is this going to be right for my child?
Yeah, and I know that some people are a little bit apprehensive sometimes about requesting a visit, or do you just go to the open evening? Do you not go to the open
Mhm.
evening? Is it okay to go more than once? But I just say go as many times as you need. So advantages of open evenings is you can see the schools kind of all singing and dancing. They often have things that are interactive for children to get involved in. It really is a chance for a school to sell itself and you see it at its best. But sometimes it's useful to have a visit when it's just you there, so you can talk, you can ask the questions that you want to ask. Your child might be a little bit overwhelmed by the experience of an open evening, so going when the school's a little bit quieter might be more beneficial for them. Or perhaps you want to go once with them and once on your own, because we all know it's difficult to have a child in tow and ask the relevant questions. So what I would say is, if you feel you want to go more than just the once, then just pick up the phone and ask, because I don't think I've ever worked in a place that would have said no, you can't come and visit. And if they do say no, then that might tell you something about
Well,
them.
no.
So yeah, just pick up the phone and arrange a visit.
So yeah, absolutely. Schools should be very happy to show you around as many times as you might need to go. And as you said, sometimes it's good to go without a child in tow. And if you can go in the daytime when the children are there in lessons, like you say, and they are hopefully engaged in their learning, looking happy and smiling, you can see the kind of things on display. And you might want to know if they've got potentially a nurture room or a sensory room. I don't know. It depends again on your child's needs. If it's something that your child needs, if they've got a good outdoor learning, if they've got forest school provision, and so on. So it just gives you a really good flavour of what it's like to be a child at that school.
And you've just sparked something in my head, actually, because, you know, it is
Yeah.
important to give your child an opportunity to see this new environment and to see how they think about it. But it's also an opportunity for them to ask questions as well. So perhaps not so much at the secondary school level, but certainly the little ones, they quite often want to know, you know, where do you hang your
Of course it
bag
is.
up? Who's going to play with me at playtime? All of that kind of thing. So it's their opportunity to ask their questions as well.
Occasionally, you might find if you take a child around in the daytime, sometimes the school will provide someone like a year six child or someone else to go along with you as well and take you on a tour from the school, and they can tell you what it's like for them to be a child at that school. That's nice.
I think, are the dinners nice, is a key question to be asking. But Jason, what are the questions do you think that as adoptive parents we should be asking when we are visiting a school?
There's lots of stuff you want to remember. There might be things you want to ask and you wished you'd asked, and you've left the school and you thought, oh. So you're better off taking a pen and paper and making a few notes. Why not? You're not grilling the school. You're not inspecting them. You're just trying to find out as much information as you can. So I don't think anyone would find that an odd thing to do. So I'd be asking who the designated person is. Do they have a designated teacher for either looked after or adopted children? Talk about how they manage communication, obviously you don't have to have pet meetings, but nevertheless there might still be a system where they can have regular meetings to give updates with parents and make sure that the needs are being met and that you can feel reassured that they take these things seriously. Do they feel warm, welcoming, open to those sorts of things? Do they have, like I said before, provisions such as a sensory room if it's something a child might need, or space where they can go? I mean, I'm thinking of a child that we had who needed a space to sometimes just go and hide away when things got a bit too much, a bit overwhelmed, and they knew they could just go there to feel a bit safer. And it was handled so brilliantly that no one made a big deal of it, and there was no embarrassment for the child, and the rest of the class just saw it as normal, somewhere that they go, a little den that they'd built. So those sort of things, you want to know if they're going to be flexible for those sort of things. Are they going to, yeah, of course you can, or do they seem to be a little bit resistant and rigid, or essentially are they trauma informed? I mean, schools aren't always trauma informed. That doesn't mean they're not going to be good places to send them, but it's just good to sort of pick out some questions about how understanding they might be of a child who's experienced some earlyhood or developmental trauma of some kind.
I always like to stay quite quiet when I'm visiting a school, which I know is going to come as a surprise to anyone who actually knows me, because I normally don't mind making my views heard on things. But I think by staying quiet, you kind of give them an opportunity to tell you what is important to them. They'll be selling themselves. So if you soak up all the information they put out there, then you're going to be getting a good idea of what they consider to be important or not. And then I like to save my big questions for the end. So when they think that I'm a nice, docile person who's just there to soak up the information, then I like to hit them with, so can you explain your behaviour management policy to me, please? Because I think that's often a really good question, because all children experience challenges within school, perhaps our children more so, maybe. And sometimes, unfortunately, in school, the behaviour management policy can be quite shaming. So I think it's important that we kind of get a heads up of what they do to promote good behaviour, whether it's consistently applied throughout the school, how I'm going to be informed of good things and bad things, but also what do they do when a child is struggling, when a child is finding it difficult to stay in the classroom, when they're finding it hard to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And then, as Jason was saying, that kind of gives you an indication of how trauma informed they are in how they handle children who are struggling. So that's always a good one. Um, Again, if you wanted just to kind of make your presence known a little bit, you could always say, well, how do you spend your pupil premium money to raise the achievement of looked after and previously looked after children? That might be a nice one. I mean, all schools do have to publish on the website anyway, but it's just kind of perhaps pressing their knowledge around adoption and adoption related issues to find out whether it's something that they have in the forefront of their mind or whether it's something they're not really aware of. I'm not saying I'd judge a
Yeah.
school too harshly on their answers. If they came back to me and said, well, actually, I don't have the pupil premium information at the tip of my fingers right now, but I can get back to you, I think that's an okay answer, as long as they do get back to you. It's just perhaps kind of just pressing them to find out what they know and how good they are at communicating it, really. So yeah, behaviour management policy, designated teacher, as you mentioned, and how good they are at communicating with me. Those are probably my key things that I look out for.
That's great. So, Lisa, how much weight or importance should we place on things such as Ofsted reports or published performance data in making that decision as to which school to send our children to?
That is a great question, and I'm just hesitating slightly because I don't always have the best track record with Ofsted. It's rather stressful when they come into a school, so perhaps I haven't got the best view of them. But in reality, I think I've come to appreciate over time that schools, Ofsted, and parents all want the absolute best for children. They just come at it from quite different perspectives. And what Ofsted do is they come in and get a snapshot of the school. So they're going to be there for a day or two, sometimes day and a half, get into as many lessons as they can, talk to senior leadership team as much as they can, and really try and dig deep in the time they have available. And then they write a report and assign a rating, and then that can stay with the school for some time. And so I think as a parent, it's really important that if we're going to place a lot of weight on their rating, we take that into context. So, for example, when was the report done? If it's 5 years out of date, then actually that rating may not still apply. Okay. There may be big factors such as leadership changes, which could also impact like the current Ofsted rating. And also, it's worth reading the report to find out why they've given the rating that they have. So, if a school has got an outstanding rating due to outstanding academic achievement, then that's brilliant for them and well done. But if your child is perhaps struggling academically, or you feel that they won't like the pressure of a very academic environment, that school might not be outstanding for you. If a school maybe requires improvement because their results weren't fantastic, but they have an excellent Senko and pastoral policy, then actually that may be something that we're okay with because that may be the most nurturing environment for our child. So I think they are important and I think they do serve a purpose. But if we as parents are going to put a lot of weight on those ratings, then we need to understand what that rating is, where it came from, when it was given, and whether any changes have subsequently been made. Was that diplomatic enough, do we think? That wasn't just me saying, oh no, as a teacher, no Ofsted. No, they do have value, but they come with a lot of information attached, and I think we need to really read into that and work out what it's telling us. How do you feel, Jason?
I really like the phrase you used about saying it might be outstanding. Is it outstanding for my child or is it outstanding
Yeah.
for me? That is absolutely critical, isn't it? Because what is the reason they got outstanding, and if it's going to fit your child? And there are schools that get outstanding because they've got excellent
Yes.
pastoral provision, and actually one of the reasons they are succeeding academically is because they nurture their children and make sure that they're ready to learn. and feel comfortable learning. So, and that's great. And hopefully that'll come through in the reports. The reports these days are really short. That's one thing I've noticed. The inspections are quite intense and detailed, even though a short amount of time. But the reports are really written in quite short couple of pages. It's kind of, is that it after all that?
But from a parental perspective, as readable as possible and not taking up too much of our time is probably a good thing. If we can get the headlines quite quickly, then hopefully we can understand that rating a little bit better.
So yeah, I wouldn't be put off by a rating particularly. If it requires improvement, that might not be a problem at all.
So, Jason, how do you apply to a school?
Thankfully, it's quite easy. You just go to the local
Okay.
authority website, and there's usually a form there that you can complete. You can even just do it on the phone. Usually got a number. They'll do it over the phone with you as well. Nice and easy. They put all the key dates on there as well. So in terms of deadlines for applications, obviously there'll be times when people might have to apply midterm or at other times of the year, because if a child just comes to live with you, then you might have finding a school for them. And that, again, that's straightforward. It's the same process. It's just there won't be a particular deadline attached to it.
Yeah, so the deadlines are 31st of October for secondary schools, and then I think it's the 31st of January for primary schools. And what's quite nice to know is that adopted children do have kind of like a priority assigned to them. So you are requested to put down, I think it's at least 2, if not 3 options, but actually we should, in our position as adoptive parents, be able to put down our favourite and be quite
Yeah,
hopeful that they're going to get in. And if not, then we can, go down the appeals process. But that is a whole
yeah.
different podcast in itself, to be
It
honest.
is. I think that'll be another one we could do another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the admissions criteria for schools always put at the very top, looked after and post looked after children as
Yeah.
priority.
One
They're
thing I
quite
would
right, yeah.
say about applying within a term, so if your child comes to live with you, like within a school term, within an academic year, and so you're applying outside of the normal times, as well as going through the local authority website, it's always a good idea to actually make contact with the school, which is kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about visiting and getting a feel for it. But also, it's just to kind of find out, have they got room? And also to give them a heads up of any additional needs that they might need to plan for, because their planning for staffing and like providing additional support would have been done in preparation for the September start. And so if those changes are being made in the middle of a year, it's useful just to give them a bit of a heads up. So yeah, you can only apply through the local authority website, but make contact with the school and discuss your needs as normal to give them as much of a heads up as you possibly can.
Yeah, certainly. Get that communication going from the beginning. That's definitely the right thing to do. A lot of our children will need additional provision, and often they'll have an education, health and care plan. So that opens up a whole new raft of options potentially. And I think it can be quite difficult for parents to consider what's best for their child. Sometimes it's clear. You might know very clearly that your child will benefit from being in a different kind of setting. In which case, my advice would be to use all the support you can get from Adoption Focus, because there's lots of post-adoptive support there. People sometimes get in touch with me, and I sometimes get involved in that if that's necessary. But again, a lot of the same things we've said, I think, are as just important, as in go and visit the school, find out what they provide, think about your child there, take your child along if you think that's going to be helpful. Lots of visits, lots of questions, lots of things to weigh up and consider. Often the schools that are providing specialist provision are not going to be that local. So some children are obviously having to travel, sometimes in a taxi, for example. So these are all factors that people might take into account when thinking about sending a child to a school. Is this something they can manage? Is it going to be okay for them? But ultimately, it's about very much fitting the individual needs of your child to what the school provides. And the whole raft of schools out there that provide all kinds of different provision. And as time's gone by, local authorities used to provide additional specialist provision, but as time's gone by, what's happened is there's been much more diversification. So preschools, for example, have been set up where people have decided there's a particular need that no one seems to cater for, and they're going to set up a school. I've just been talking with a family actually who were looking for a therapeutic placement for a child. And actually, there's not many of those around. There's lots of schools that deal with, for example, social, emotional, behavioural issues, and often children who've experienced trauma, our children sometimes present with those, and they're sometimes confused with having behavior issues, he says in air quotes, but that might not be really what's going on. It might be that they need some real important therapeutic input, and so sometimes you have to search quite far to find these schools. They're not always as easy to find as you might hope, but there is lots of support out there. Every local authority will have a version of parent partnership, SENDIAS or something, which is an independently, although it's run by the local authority, and they may end up supporting you to challenge the local authority's decisions in some cases. They are there to provide support for parents, particularly when navigating the whole world of special educational needs and disabilities, which is a minefield in itself. We will probably have to, I'm sure, a podcast all around supporting children with additional needs. I think that's going to be essential because it's a big topic. Lisa, if there's anything you want to add from that point of view?
No, I think you've covered it there. So I'd agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said.
Thanks, Jason and Lisa. I think you've definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope the same for our listeners at home, whether that be visiting a school, questions to ask, or considering alternative educational provisions. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to look out for future episodes on Adoptiverse, such as Parents' Evening, Trauma Triggers Within School, and some of those that you've heard today. Don't forget you can contact us at any time with your suggestions, contributions or questions at education@adoption-focus.org.uk. Thanks for listening.